The reality of wrestling has been in the news recently. Ronda Rousey earned the ire of her fans and her colleagues by using the F word. Meanwhile, Mark Henry has been coming down on Ryback for doing pretty much the same thing, despite the wrestling world being what made Ryback's name. As a wrestling fan, I've been fielding the question of is wrestling real or is wrestling fake for basically my entire life, as I'm sure of most of you. People always assume I've been tricked, hoodwinked, or somehow bewildered by Vince McMahon and his shiny Roman Reigns style toys. The idea that I could watch a TV show purely for entertainment value and interest in characters seems baffling to so many people, and yet these are the same people who enjoy watching Marvel films or Game of Thrones. I mean, you know Chris Evans can't actually travel through time, right? So let's answer the question, once and for all, right here and right now. Is wrestling real or is wrestling fake? Take a moment to hit like on the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and welcome to the first in what I'm sure will be many installments of WTF Wrestling. Now, contrary to popular belief, pro wrestling did not start with Vince McMahon. Also, and somewhat confusingly, it didn't start with Vince McMahon either. I'll probably have to put up a picture there just to make sure there's no confusion. Wrestling in many different incarnations has been around for a very long time, and it wasn't until the WWF became the big boy in town and became global that it stopped being its previous territorial way. That was a bit of a hostile takeover of the wrestling market though. A lot of people weren't happy with that situation. While every region had its own stars and storylines and ultimately its own rivalries with other territories, there was one rule which was absolutely unbreakable, no matter how many backstage politics and how many internal rivalries happened. That being the rule of kayfabe. Kayfabe is a well-known phrase in wrestling communities that essentially refers to the very special and distinct reality in which wrestling takes place. Now there's a bit of a hidden message between the lines there. Wrestling has its own distinct reality because essentially since its inception, and no matter how many different wrestling companies there are, none of them want to exist in actual reality. They want to exist in something slightly to the side of that. The wrestling world literally operates by different rules to actual reality. It is very distinct and very clear in many different ways. In kayfabe, violence is the answer. Recovery times are very, very low. People often do horrendous things to each other and don't even get fired. And yes, people never talk it out. They get into fights over coffee and people pretend to have sex with dead people. Wrestling. We live in a world where Mark Henry is a father to a hand. And I didn't even mention who the mother was. Wrestling has never tried to be all that real, and yet people still seem to want to ask the question. Most fiction has its own version of reality. If you're an anime fan, have you ever seen one of those animes where someone's nose bursts open when their perversion basically explodes from their face? That's not something that actually happens. If you want to go in a different route, in The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf the Grey essentially goes to the grave and then comes back white. Nobody comes back whiter. That's not something that happens. Is wrestling real? No. Did you turn on to watch a documentary? No. If wrestling existed in the actual reality we live in, it would be two guys arguing, one of them would get fired, and then everyone would get back to work because they're afraid to lose their jobs. That'd be it. It'd be boring. Why would anyone watch that? Simple fact is, I don't want my wrestling to be too real. I want Mimosa Mayhem matches. Give me everything The Undertaker has ever done and his lightning powers. Give me Mankind being thrown off of Hell in a Cell and surviving. That's not real. No one would actually survive that. Here's the issue with this though. Wrestling isn't fake either. Mick Foley suffers every day with the injuries he has sustained. If you've ever watched Mick Foley on Wife Swap, which is an entertaining watch, I'll definitely say, he literally has to have his socks put on for him. He really suffers physically. The fact that he's been locked in a hotel room for a while is probably quite a scary thing, even more so than just coronavirus. The Undertaker literally can't extend his fingers fully. When he tried, on the documentary 5-part series, his wife had to explain what he was doing because he was nowhere close. Painkiller addiction has been rife in wrestling for years upon years. Wrestlers are literally people who are so dedicated to the entertainment of complete strangers that they take years off their lives. In some cases, decades have been taken off of their lives. Just like us, they turn up to work, they get told do this, say this, and risk this. And then they get thousands of people on social media telling them they suck at it. Wrestling isn't real. Wrestling isn't fake. Wrestling is just like any other TV show. It's there to entertain. If you're being entertained by it, it's doing the job. Different shows have different styles, and that's a good thing, because different people like different things. If a show's not entertaining you, you're probably watching the wrong show. Some wrestling tries to market itself as more real or less real than others, but this is just marketing. It's just a way to try and hook people based on certain buzzwords. Nobody's out here claiming Stadium Stampede was the most perfectly real thing in the world, but it's damn sure entertaining, isn't it? When it comes to wrestling, I have one simple rule. Don't overthink it. Things don't often make too much sense. And yeah, we have a right to ask questions and try and make some sense out of it. But there is such a thing as too real, as anyone who's familiar with the phrase uncanny valley knows and can attest to. We don't want real. We want spectacular. I've been Tom Colohue. Let me know what sort of wrestling you like below the line. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you can, and thank you for watching.